Thank you for joining For Our Special Kids, where we openly and honestly discuss the magic and the mess of raising a child with special needs. We are thrilled to have you here and hope this time provides you with some wonder and wisdom. I'm your host, Jennifer Lansing. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to For Our Special Kids. I am really happy that you've decided to listen today. Thank you so much. It means the world to me that you take time out of your day to be here. I wanted to give you a couple of fun updates. One, if you sign up for our newsletter at For Our Special Kids, you'll receive 6 steps to enhance your intuition from Teal's Higher Self for free. I received this information from Teal's Higher Self when I was journaling a few months ago and wanted to share it with you because I think it's a really great basic checklist and series of questions that you can ask to help better understand how to tap into that intuition so that you can be a better person and a better mama or a dad or a caregiver. So go to forourspecialkids.com, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll send that over to you. And if you're already signed up, just expect to receive this free gift sometime in your email box in the future. Also, I'm working on an intuitive parenting course. I mentioned this in early 2023, so stay tuned for that information as well. I would love for you to join me on that journey. Okay, on to the show. In today's episode, I speak with Joy, a mom to a beautiful 7-year-old boy. Joy reached out to me actually via Instagram, and I'm so glad that she did. Today, we talk about mom rage, or insert any caregiver rage, dad rage, in our conversation. We get into why it happens and what we can do to repair afterwards or hopefully prevent it altogether. I express how some of my mom rage comes out more towards Alex versus towards Teal. And I think that's something to really look at as well, as where are you expressing your mom rage? So we cover lots of great information today. I hope you really find value in our conversation. As always, I hope you enjoy and let me know what you think. I am so honored to introduce you to my guest today. Joy lives in a rural area in southern BC, Canada. She grew up in a big city, but has always felt a very strong pull to be in nature. She's a mom to a creative and energetic 7-year-old who has Down syndrome. Joy expresses herself in a variety of ways in this life. I love that you wrote that, in this life, as a singer, dancer, bartender, fashion designer, costumer for TV and film, a yoga teacher, and mom. Joy wrote this to me. I have expanded and shifted the most from being a parent. My son has retaught me how to be present, playful, curious, and silly. He is the greatest gift and the wisest sage. Oh, that just gives me shivers all over. Welcome to the show, Joy.
Thanks so much for having me. Oh, it's such an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Oh, wow. I'm thrilled to have you here. And full disclosure here, I received an Instagram message from Joy on mom rage, on our topic. You were just requesting if I knew anyone to chat with, if I had maybe done an interview that maybe you hadn't seen on this topic. And sad to say, I was like, I'll get back to you. I was like, oh, I don't know. I'm going to have to think about this. And then we ended up starting this great dialogue. And I asked you to join me today to be here and to talk about mom rage. And I'll be the first one to tell you, 1, you're not alone. 2, it's extremely vulnerable. And we were, oh, you already crying? Oh, no.
A little bit, sorry.
No, it's good because I'll, you know me, I'll cry too. It's an incredibly vulnerable and raw thing to talk about. So I'm honored that you said yes and that you took a risk to be with me today. And I want everyone who's listening to also remember that as a result of being vulnerable and raw, we also need you to be gentle with us because we're going to talk about things that maybe we're not proud of and that pulls up a lot of shame and guilt and resentment and negative self-talk. So do you want to start with what was going on in your world that caused you to say, I'm just going to text Jen of all people. The crazy one with the crazy podcast.
Sure. The inspiring one with the inspiring podcast.
Oh.
Yeah. So I live a pretty isolated life. Like I said, I came from a big city. I've always, known and spoken to lots and lots of people, but these days I find myself sort of isolated in nature, living with my partner and my son and our animals, our 2 dogs and chickens. And I do teach yoga a few times a week, which I have a beautiful community out here of people that practice with me. And then also, I have a nice connection through different moms that I'm friends with from my son's school and just people in the community. Living in a small town, you run into people at the grocery store, you just have chats with people on the street. So that's all really nice. But I find that most of my connections these days are really sort of surface level. I don't really have a lot of really deep connections like I have at other points in my life. I just sort of feel like on this journey of parenting, especially a child with special needs, I navigate a lot of it by myself. I've done a lot of self-discovery over the course, I guess, the past 10 years. And I think when I started on that path, I was really trying to fix certain things about myself. I've since discovered that I don't need to fix anything about myself, but that I can definitely live in, just a more balanced way. And so I've been working on that. And my son now is 7.5, but when he was about 2, this one instance that I totally remember, I totally raged out and I was just like, what is this? Like, I don't have anger. I'm not an angry person. I mean, my name's Joy, for God's sakes. Like, I don't have anger.
Actually, you can't. It's
name.
not an option.
Yeah.
It's not in your job description.
No, it's not. It's not. And so I was really, really actually frightened by that. And I didn't understand what was happening.
Can you tell us what happened? Yeah. Can you go to that moment?
Yeah. So realistically, what happened in that moment was that I was just extremely overtired. I was pushed to my limit in the sense that I wasn't taking care of myself. I've been always a very selfless kind of people pleaser without any boundaries. And in that moment, everything sort of boiled to a head. And I was screaming to myself, like, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
But really, it was coming out directed towards my child, which really, really scared me and obviously made me feel very shameful and very uncomfortable after. When I was a child, I had a lot of yelling in my household, and it wasn't my parents. It was my parent, one of my parents, and my sibling. My sibling was very, very challenging at this stage in his life. And, now he has a beautiful relationship with my parents and he's a beautiful person. But, when he was a teenager, he just was going through a lot. So there was very explosive anger, and I am an empath and I'm very, very sensitive, and it scared me. And I vowed to never, ever treat my parents like that. I would never, ever make another person feel that way.
Right.
And so at that moment, I repressed all of my anger, and I experienced frustration and other strong emotions, but my anger was definitely like buried at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so it came out when I became a parent, and then it was like so uncontrollable. Like it was just this like animalistic rage. Like for a moment, I almost snapped into this like monster.
Yeah.
And I just was like, what is this? Like, what do I even do with this? I decided to find a therapist and do some talk therapy around it. And luckily I found a therapist that did somatic healing as well. And through yoga.
For our listeners, what is somatic healing? No, it's okay.
Somatic healing it's sort of getting into the body as well. So, I would do movements as I would recount something that was traumatic or, stressful, or an experience that I had.
An emotional situation.
Yeah, I would move in a way in my body to sort of like move the energy out. And so that was really cool. Through practicing yoga, I have a very dedicated practice. I would also shake through my body if I needed to release any sort of stale energy or energy that was too big.
Mm-hmm.
So I started sort of trying to implement these kinds of movements within my interactions with my son. When things would get heated, I would shake my limbs. I'd try and dispel that energy. And over time, as I invited curiosity around what this rage was trying to tell me, I was able to incorporate like a lot of mindful practices to the situations with him. So I think it got a lot better. And I definitely could find a pause before I would just react.
Mm-hmm.
But my son is now 7.5, and he's extraordinarily individuated. Like he just really knows who he is, and he is super independent and very stubborn. I mean, he's awesome, but he still needs our help with certain things, right? He'll fight me physically, like he'll hit me. And he's been in this no phase for years where just everything is no, no, no. And some days it's like 1,000 no's before 7 a.m. And it's just like, holy cow.
Holy cow is right.
Yeah. So it's sort of been a lot to manage. And I've really had to work on boundaries. I've really had to cultivate and sustain like daily practices that nurture myself. That's just a little bit of backstory.
Yeah.
And so when I reached out to you, I had sort of felt like I got to a place where I wasn't really experiencing this anymore. Like it had subsided, but then summer came and we were together. He's in school, so we were together 24/7. And my husband works shift work, so he works 7 days a week and then he's off 7 days a week. So it's a
Oy.
long time, and he works 12-hour shifts. So it's a long time to be the sole parent without a break. And like I say, we live, my parents live halfway across the country and we don't
Yeah.
have family around here. And, I have a little bit of support, but not as much as I need, to be super honest. Like,
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, you're being so real. Like you're painting the picture of so many of our lives. So many good points in that conversation. I'm like,
conversation with myself.
Where do we start? I'm like, okay, let's go back to minute 2. No, I'm kidding. I love it though, because the backstory is really interesting because you thought, that you had figured it out. You're like, yes, I have mastered this. My somatic emotional releases are working. I'm working through my childhood issues, which is, I think, a lot of where we all start. I mean, it was so interesting as you were chatting, I'm all, oh, that's where some of my anger comes from. Cause I don't know. I don't do a lot of the childhood stuff because I'm like, go forward. It's like, well, no. As I was hearing you talk about the life you were living as your sibling was yelling with your family, one, I had a panic mode of, oh my gosh, what is my daughter going to say eventually? Like, oh yeah, my mom yelled at her, yelled at dad, or me every now and then. I'm like, oh Gord, oh, good God. Oh Gord, that's like God and Lord put together. Good Gord. So I was thinking, where would my anger have come from as a child? And bless my parents, but they had a lot raising me because you think I'm hyper now. Imagine what 10-year-old Jen was, not 48-year-old Jen. So all I heard was calm down. Don't be yourself. Calm down. Don't be yourself. Stop being you. Stop being you. They love me. You guys have heard my mom on the podcast. She's amazing, but that I had to shove it all down. And so now I'm like, oh no, here she comes. Here's Jen, all of her coming at you with all this energy. But guess what? All this energy also says all this anger, all this emotion, all this sadness, all this happiness, all this joy, and all this bright energy. It also comes with the negative. All this bright, and my mom taught me this a long time ago, that you have a choice in life to either stay close to the emotional pendulum. In other words, you can be a little happy, and that means when it swings, you're just a little sad. And that's safe. Or you can be a lot happy, but that also means it swings and you can be a lot sad, a lot angry. You can be a lot bright and crazy and joyful, crazy in a good way, a lot, a lot, but that means it swings to the other side. And as you were talking, we beat ourselves up because we're expected to let the pendulum swing all the way over to exuberance and joyfulness and brilliance and all that, but we're not allowed to let it swing to the other side. Yeah. And so maybe the first thing for all of us is to simply give ourselves grace. Like, hey, I don't want to show my child safe emotions, like little baby emotions. I want them to feel joyful and brilliant and boisterous and all of that. But with that comes some of the other emotions we have to work with.
Yeah.
I mean, does that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Because I don't want to show Teal like this little non-joyful mom.
Like, it's the balance. And I think that, we had talked about Dr. Becky's podcast or YouTube with
Anna Mather. I think it's podcast 46 on the Good Inside podcast with Dr. Becky.
So one thing that they talk about there, and I've heard actually one of your guests talk about too, is the repair after. That's the most important. The reaction, or they speak about this as well, where good people, just not necessarily acting in a great way at that point, but going back in the repair after. And definitely one thing that I've always done with my son is sit down and explain, look, mom was upset or mom got frustrated, and this is why. And it wasn't okay to yell, and I'm sorry. We go through that, and it gives him a place too to express his emotion. He's verbal, but his speech is quite delayed. Mm-hmm. And I see him getting super frustrated a lot, and he acts out through sometimes his body.
Yeah.
So that's another way to model, hey, we can use our words. We can say, I'm frustrated, I'm mad, instead of hitting or kicking or pushing. And definitely we have those conversations, and we have them frequently, and not just around this issue, but around lots of things and emotion. And that even extends to, yes, being happy and feeling silly or whatever.
Yeah. Dr. Becky's whole concept is we're all messy. We're all messy at times, right? But that you have to repair. And I'm not sure I grew up in a household that ever repaired, right? It was just, okay, go on. Okay, we yelled, go on. And there are plenty of times now that I come back to Teal and say exactly like what you said. I just use words of how I behaved in that situation wasn't okay, but this is the true emotion, and that emotion is okay. Because it's important for us to honor that they get that, how nice are we to our kids, right? You try to have the most amount of patience for him. I try to have the most amount of patience for Teal. And yet I don't give myself that same grace. One thing that they talked about on the podcast, I took some notes that Anna and Dr. Becky had, was how do you feel in this moment and what do you need? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you feel and what do you need? I say that to Teal all the time, but I don't say it to myself. No. And I certainly don't say it to Alex. I mean, well, I do actually probably more to Alex than I do to myself for sure. I'm like, oh no, you do. But how do you feel and what do you need? And I think you were chatting about the one time that you really seared into your brain when he was 2, you were exhausted. There was nothing, you were at rock bottom. And when we don't have a full bucket, there's nothing. Like, I think about the times that I lose my cool. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you, I lose my cool with Alex more than I lose my cool with Teal. I still lose my cool with her, but I am more the one that just, when I'm exhausted, when I have nothing, when I have not been giving to myself at all, I lose it with him first. And I think that was really important, and just in general, for me to be like, where am I at? What's missing that's causing me to get so angry? And then when you step back and go, okay, what is it? We talked about this on in preparation for this call, the movie Elemental from Disney. So you watched it after. I was like, hey, have you watched the Disney movie Elemental? Because without you know, and you're like, no. And then like whatever, a day later, he's like, we watched it. Good old Disney
And I
Plus.
was like, oh my gosh, yes, that's totally me.
Yeah, so me too. So it's about this, about the four elements, and the fifth one is spirit. If you've watched Frozen 2, you know that the fifth element is spirit. Hello, Elsa. Anywho, it's about this element fire, and her name is Ember. And just spoiler alert, stop listening if you haven't watched it, or if you're going to be really mad at me for telling you. But it's basically, one of my main takeaways was, look at me ramble, dude. One of my main takeaways was, I am angry. I am full of passion, but I'm angry, the negative passion, when I am not living my true self, when I am not doing the meditation, doing the breath work, doing the yoga, getting outside in nature, painting, journaling, writing. I get bitter, and I it's like I have like this shell of a shell on me. And you're like, wow, you do edit a lot. Like, oh my God. But it's like it's cracked and crumbling and like peeling away from me, and dry and yucky. And that's when I lose it. That's when I lose it, when I'm not being true to like what, not filling me up with what I need.
Yeah,
So
100%.
yeah. Talk to me about what you're thinking outside of
For
your whack
me,
job.
no, I love how visual that description is. And for me, I felt so bound. I just kept seeing myself in like all these restraints. And really what it was for me was I'm also really independent, and I totally lost my like sense of living in motherhood. Like I allowed myself to really put my son like absolutely at the forefront of every single day. And I wasn't carving out any time for myself at all. I was noticing that I would like zone out and I just like go on my phone. You know, that would be like
Yes.
my escape, you know, which
Yeah.
is so brutal. We
Mm-hmm.
live in nature, so we get out a lot, but I don't go by myself and just be. So I ended up buying a paddleboard this summer, and we have
Good.
lots of lakes around here. Yeah. And when Wiley was in school, I would spend like a couple hours, a couple times a week going out and just paddling. And that literally was my medicine, like being on water, being in nature. It's so calming. It's beautiful. It's so relaxing. And so I started making that a priority. And I would say, even if my husband was working, because, you know, the summers here, the days are long. We have sun until 10 o'clock at night, basically. And so he would get home from work and I'd say, okay, I'm going to go for an evening paddle. And I just go out on the lake and spend an hour and a half or so. And I was really prioritizing that because yoga used to be my prioritizing self-care daily routine. We live in a tiny house. And so my son is sitting beside me watching a show so that I can do yoga. And I'm like blocking out all this stuff. And to be honest, I'll tell you a couple things. I think that I'm on the spectrum. I'm for sure have OCD. I am probably ADHD. So my son has sensory processing stuff. I do too. Doing some research, even for this talk, and just I love learning and just listening to certain podcasts. I've learned about overtouch. And so when you're a parent of small children or a child with sensory issues, you also get like so worn out through just all the touching all day, you
Uh-huh.
know? And so I was tapped out when I contacted you. I was so tapped out from every single, like physically, I was tired from the summer. I just had zero time to myself because I could no longer prioritize going paddleboarding because my son won't sit on a paddleboard with me. Whenever he's around, it's no longer a self-care, it's a parental care
Yeah.
or just,
It's
you know, there's someone
childcare.
else
I mean, it's
occupying the
it's it's
space.
taking care of your child. It's being a
Yeah.
mom.
And then I've also noticed like he expresses himself very loudly often, and so does my husband. And I am just overloaded like through all types of stimulation all day, every day.
Yeah.
When I reached out to you, I just was like, I don't even know what to do anymore, because it seems as though now I am getting to a point where, like, my son will kind of like, he pushes and pushes and pushes. He kind of, I think, on a weird level, enjoys a reaction. He's a big actor. He likes being center of attention, and he kind of is like, I'm going to reach for this as slowly as I can after you've said, please don't touch that 4 times, and I'm going to knock it on the floor and break it.
Mm-hmm.
And in the slow-mo, I can feel, like in Elemental, I can feel the water boiling.
The fire's
and
boiling, or
the
it's
fire
boiling.
burning.
Burning.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And it's almost like that moment of pause in making the conscious choice doesn't exist in those moments. It's like, it becomes just this sort of instinctual reaction, right? And that's why I reached out, because to me, it felt like, I have all these mindfulness practices. I do have a pause that I can tap into, but sometimes and now it's like an aha moment. It's like when I am so drained, when I'm so tapped out, when my cup is empty, I don't have any resources left. I've already set myself already in fight or flight. I'm not coming from a base level. It makes sense that I don't have anything to reach for, because there's nothing left to reach for.
There's nothing in there. Exactly. You've given it all away. I love it that you're able to somewhat feel the fire burning. I often just go from exactly where like 0 to a hot 550 degrees, and good luck if you're in my path.
Mm-hmm.
Like I take it out on my husband, bless him. I know he listens. Love you, honey. And that's where, for me, I've been in preparation for this conversation. It's been so good for me to be like, okay, let's analyze this a little bit more, because you're going to have to talk about it. It was like, okay, exactly like what you're saying is, what is going on within me that causes me to go from 0 to 550 degrees? And yes, it is when I have nothing, but I want to figure out a way and it might just, God, I'm so sorry, I'm processing as we're talking.
No, that's
it
good.
Might just be, I have to put some water in the cup to let it boil, right? Like I just burn the cast iron, right? I mean, I just am like scorching things. Well, if there's something in the pot before, I mean, then I know I'm very visual. So like I can see it right now in my head. Like if you don't have any water in the pot, you're just going to burn things. But if you've got water in the pot, then you can feel the steam coming out. Then you can see the bubbles starting to simmer. Oh, hold on. The bubbles are bubbling. Oh, a little bit more. Oh, we're getting close to boiling. Better, but if there's nothing in there, then I have no, I don't know what's the right word. There's no warning signs, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. And I absolutely agree with that. And when I say that I can feel myself burning, often if it's that reactionary kind of rageful burn, then it just comes out and it's very quick. It's not a slow burn.
No, me
but
too.
When I can take that pause, it is a slow burn, and I have a chance to make a conscious choice. Do I want to react here? Or do I want to just take a breath? And you know what? I have a few times been like, I still want to react, because at the end of the day,
oh, good on you.
Even though I am an adult, there is a part of me sometimes that's like, what about me? And I don't think that's ever talked about as a parent. What about me? Mm-hmm. Like, I feel childish saying that, but it's so important.
I'm getting shivers. If they could see your face, like you just became like your 8-year-old self.
Yeah.
Saying, but I matter too.
I matter too. I matter as a parent, I matter as a person.
You matter as a person. That's a better statement. I matter as a human being. What about me?
Yeah.
It's a good question. And we, especially as moms, nothing against dads, but moms do take more of the burden. And it's not a bad burden, but the weight. Maybe it's just the weight. We take more of it. I mean, Teal is meaner to me than she is to Alex, ever.
Same.
Ever. And I like to say it's because she loves me more.
But it is.
we
Well,
take,
it's not that she loves you more. It's that
no, it's,
you're her
I'm
safest,
the safe
right?
place.
And yeah.
Exactly. In preparing for this and listening to other podcasts and just pulling things out is the what about me? I mean, all these emotions pile on about it. Like, who are you to say that? What kind of a mom are you to say that? Like, what you chose to have your child, like, you knew this was going to be hard. What about you? Well, you were buried long ago when you had this baby, and that's not right.
Mm-mm.
That's
Yeah.
not right. And yet, all of that stuff just piles on. And oh, no other mother feels that way. Oh, yes, we do.
Mm.
And there's nothing wrong with saying it. All this work on finding your inner child. I'm like, yeah, well, here she is. Welcome to the party, inner child.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's also part of all of this work is, or exploration is inviting that part of you to the table. It's like, we try and shove that, like I did most of my life, shove it away, shove it away. But the thing is that there's real messages in these parts of ourselves, and there's a place for them at the table too. And as hard as it is to invite them in, we have to, without shame or guilt.
It's also
Yeah.
important to show our children that,
Yeah.
hey, Teal, when you become a parent, if you choose to, you have to put yourself first. And I know
Hmm.
that sounds really weird, but in order for me to be the best mom, the best human being, the best wife, the best friend, the best person that I can be, if I'm empty, there's not, like, I can't. I don't want to demonstrate that to my daughter. Like, oh,
Hmm.
dad goes on little vacations with friends, and he goes and hangs out with people and he fills his cup, but oh, mommy doesn't, because mommy's here for you. What does that
Yeah.
show? Like, I want her to say, my 8-year-old self is important too. I'm important too. Like, I want to demonstrate that for our children.
Yeah. It's so important. And, it definitely took me many, many years to realize that. And I think that really I'm only starting to realize that and really embody that, really express that. And it did kind of start on my yoga mat here, saying to my son, like, no, this is my time. Like, you go and entertain yourself. I'm not getting snacks right now. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. This is my time for me. And I really say that. And so now, when I do yoga, he's like, oh, mom's doing yoga.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to jump all over me, and sometimes he still does. And I don't let it affect me. It's actually a time that I'll invite play.
Yeah.
I'll get back to my practice after. And that's one thing that you had actually mentioned in your response to when I reached out was, can you just find joy, try and find some joy in your life? And I definitely notice that sometimes when I do, definitely for us, sort of when I lose my cool is around safety, if he's not being safe and not
Well,
listening,
yes.
obviously.
Yeah.
And then also if we have a time frame, I try and pad 10 minutes onto our departure time always so that we can take our time if we need. But I find that he's really inviting me to play a lot of times when he's being quote unquote challenging or like not
Right.
listening or whatever. And if I can sort of just drop the agenda, the schedule, and feel into that, which is hard for me because I'm very type A, but it's like this constant invitation to play. And if you can just see it as that and roll with it, then you know what, you can probably carry on and do what you're requesting after, with a
So
better heart.
beautiful. So beautiful. Look at it as an invitation to play. I love that, Joy. Like,
Mm.
that's really good. That is. It's, I just look at things, and I know Dr. Becky talks a lot about finding boundaries. So like when you've said, no, don't touch that. No, don't touch that. It's like, she'll be the one to say, instead of just saying that, you say, no, I do not want you touching that. And if you do attempt or even start moving in that direction, I will remove you or that item from the situation. I will do that because I'm setting a boundary and this is what the consequence will be. So that's all fine and dandy.
Mm-hmm.
Like pushing over a vase and breaking it is not an invitation to play. That's an invitation to
Yeah.
get yelled at. I'm sorry. Okay,
And
maybe not yelled at, but
a,
reprimanded.
yeah, that's a lot of words to like. The thing with my son too is I have to keep things simple, right?
Simple.
I explain myself very concisely and
Yes.
the expectation around it. But the no loop that he's been in for about 4 years is probably because we were like, no, no, Wiley, no, no, Wiley, don't do that. Wiley, no, no, no. Then his whole world becomes no. So I wasn't taught how to, like, our educational assistants and stuff at school, there are these magical beings that have been taught how to redirect and how to word things in ways that, like, I'm like, why didn't we do these courses, as parents? Because I feel like I sort of set up this path of no's without intending to, and then it ended up being a major frustration in our dynamic.
Sure. We should brainstorm this because I think what you're saying is very true, especially in the moment. You don't have a lot of extra words. And that is one thing that Dr. Becky is very, very good at, is a lot of words. Oh, my Lanta. And I've actually messaged her before and said, I'd really like you to talk about a child that's neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm.
I'd really actually like you to approach that concept. And she's never responded. Now, she's also quite busy, but I think it would be a really good conversation. Yeah. Even just for parents that don't have neurodivergent children, right? And I don't know, whatever word you want to use. It's so controversial, all these words. But it is like, so we should brainstorm. So it's like, how would you concisely say, I will remove the vase if you touch it? I mean, I guess that's, or, yeah, I mean, that, there you go. Yeah. But, but it's getting ahead of it. Mm-hmm. Again, if you have nothing in your pot to to boil, getting ahead of things is like impossible. But man, when I'm feeling like I'm jiving and I'm good and I've done what I need to do and I feel like I've filled myself up, I'm like, oh, I can get ahead of that. She's going to go over there and I'm just going to redirect. I'm going to give her 2 other choices because I know she's going over there. I'm going to give her 2 other choices and just make a left turn.
I think that's how it works. Not necessarily wording around like the consequence around touching this, and that's kind of what I've learned from our support system through the school and through all the amazing therapists we've had in his life so far. Like this morning, we almost had, I could see that there was some things starting within resistance from him. I'm asking him to come and get ready, but I'm like, hey, let's pick a song to listen to on the way walking down to the bus. What playlist do you want? He loves Halloween. You want Halloween songs? Let's pick a song about zombies.
Yeah.
And I can redirect it in a way that has nothing to do with even touching that item.
Right.
You're not always there. Like you said, like if there's no water in that pot, then your mind isn't on that trajectory.
So the big thing is, good job, mama.
Oh,
right?
Thanks.
Like we so get bogged down in all things that we did wrong and we always are doing wrong, but like, whoa, awesome.
Yeah.
And then if you want to play even more, then you walk like zombies down to the bus.
Totally.
Giving him more playtime and I know this with Teal, man, she's the most frustrated when she has no time with me. Mm-hmm. I get the most negative. And my God, both of our children are magical, incredible, but we're just being honest. She gets the most frustrated and the most angry and the most aggressive, in quotes, with me when she hasn't had me.
Yeah.
And so it's stopping and playing. To go back to what you're saying, it's like, okay, hold on. Is it really that important that what's 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. Teal was 5 minutes late for school today, but she actually wasn't. She was on time. We just didn't have recess. Like she wasn't late for school, but she was 5 minutes tardier than normal. Really? She actually really just wanted to hug me. Like we had a long hug. She wanted a hug, like a hug.
My son calls them squish hugs.
Oh,
he makes that noise. He goes like
squish. Oh my God, that's so perfect. A squish hug. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, and again, it's being present enough to say, even if we were 5 minutes late for school, am I going to give up the squish hug?
No. Yeah.
No, a lot of people do.
Mm,
A lot of people do, right? A lot of people are like, no,
yeah.
we got to get your tushy wishy to school because I got to get to this meeting. If I'm 5 minutes late to a meeting, am I really that important? I am not that important in this world. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves. God, I'm not that
Yeah.
important.
Well, and also how it looks. I hate to say this, but in having a non-typical child, it's been such a blessing in so many ways. But I look at some of my friends that have quote unquote typical children, and just like all the pressure they put on themselves and their kids to like do all these things and like be so good in school. Like they're in grade 2 and all these sports that they're doing and this and that. And with my son, I just let him be. Like I let him be himself. We're exploring things that he loves to do. And I think a lot of the time, even with being late for school, it's like parents think, well, what does that look like on me? Like that I can't manage my household or this or that. And it's really at the end of the day, it just shows that maybe you guys were a couple minutes late because who cares? Yeah,
Because
maybe
who
someone wanted
cares?
to play or who cares what it even is? It doesn't matter,
Exactly. Oh my
you
goodness,
know?
such a good point. Oh, the whole comparison to everybody else thing. And
Yeah.
I do. I see a lot of my friends, not all of them, but a lot of my friends with typical in quote kids. They're ragged. Those
Yeah,
kids are
100%.
exhausted.
So are the
And
parents.
so are the parents. Yeah. Yeah. It's like here to here to here to here to here to here. And I'm like, no, you have to wait 2 weeks to get a play date in? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're going to go home and paint. I love that you're following his lead. And I think that's a huge lesson for me and all of us listening is follow their lead. And if you're getting a lot of no's, maybe it is his way of saying, I need 15 minutes of play.
Mhm. Yeah.
And maybe that's it. Maybe we can start looking at what happened 4 years ago. You said it's been about a 4-year journey of no's.
Yeah.
Was there something? Did you take a different role or did something happen? Because that is important also. Like I looked back on my childhood as you were talking and, what did
Mm.
transition, or when Teal is being most frustrated? It's I've been running around and not
Mhm.
sitting on the floor playing with her.
You know what it was? I went to work. I worked in costumes and film, and I ended up taking a contract and kind of doing part-time work. Like I'd go to the city, which is 3 hours away from here, and I'd stay for like 3, 4 days. So when he turned 2, I went back to work on and off for a bit. So, and he's the same way as Teal. He
Yeah.
definitely, as soon as I get on the phone, he's pawing me and mom, 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 like
Mm-hmm.
whenever there's a redirection of my attention, he likes to have my undivided attention. So I can
Yeah.
see that being a place where it started for sure.
Again, it's absolutely okay to have mom time and to
Yeah. Oh,
say, mom is having a conversation. I mean, I've even like not even I see parents like stopping what they're doing to address their child. Well, that's just feeding right into it, right? They're like, oh,
mm-hmm.
I got mom to stop the conversation to talk to me. And so I've had to be like, okay, hold on. How do I continue the phone call, but address the child at the same time? And so
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'll say, just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to give a sign or that look of this is me time, almost even changing that interaction by not just pausing,
Yeah.
just ignoring. And I know that's a whole ABA thing is you ignore the behaviors and that's very controversial and all that stuff. But if I don't want that behavior to persist, do I give it attention?
Mm-hmm. And I find I've kind of done the gamut of that, especially being on the phone. And I find that when I do ignore, I'll like remove myself, continue the conversation. And even, I mean, he was sick, but last week he's not a big temper tantrumy
Mm-hmm.
person, but he started crying and then he kind of soothed himself after like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It was a very short cry. It was actually something really important. And then when I was done the phone call, I went to him and I sat down and I said, I had to direct my whole energy on the phone. You just need to wait and then mom will come back to you. Just like when you want your space or your time, mom gives that to you. So again, we had like kind of a reparative conversation after, but reiterating too that space is important. If I'm sleeping and I don't want you jumping all over me, that's a time when my space, my body, my time. You can go entertain yourself for a few minutes and then mom will come to you then.
Did you give him positives for self-soothing? Because you said
Uh,
that, and I was like, oh, that's a good thing that he
yeah,
cried
you
for
know what?
10 seconds and then he was like, no, I got this. Like, that's a huge
Yeah,
step.
I didn't, and I should have. I didn't
Well, just next
even,
time.
yeah, I didn't even think about that. He self-soothes at night too, so
Yeah.
it is a good thing to reiterate because that's a big thing to be able to do.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I wonder if it's this age group with this type of a child because Teal is just now, because I've watched other parents just put their kids to sleep when they're like 3 and
Yeah.
walk away. And I'm all, it's really not an option for Teal. Like she just can't. And I know I get
Yeah.
looks and I've gotten literally judgment from
Oh.
friends, right? All that stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm parenting the way I need to parent. Thanks so much. Mind your business. But I wonder because she's just about 6 months ago, she started pushing us away every now and then. And I'll tell her, you have two choices. You can lay here and cuddle on mom,
Mm-hmm.
or you can be really hyper and bounce all around, but you get to do that by yourself.
Yeah.
Mama
Yeah.
is going to go downstairs. You have a choice now. And sometimes she pushes me out. I'm like, okay, you made the choice. And that's when
Yeah.
she's almost like, regret, regret. And I'm like, nope, you got to learn a little self soothing. I'm not a fan of a 6-month-old crying themselves to sleep because it breaks my heart. I mean,
No.
still, I
Yeah.
stand out the door and it breaks my heart as she's self soothing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's also it's an activity that is really important for us to learn. And yeah, interesting that they're both doing that now. Mm-hmm.
Originally, I don't know in what culture around this age is when children in older cultures decide to sleep on their own.
Oh,
Around the
interesting.
age of 7, there's a lot of individuation that happens.
Yeah.
And, these days, kids are forced out of our beds. Some parents don't even ever co sleep, but they're forced out of our beds and our rooms and everything very early on. But developmentally, around this age is when, in olden times,
Yeah. In
that
olden
children would
times.
choose to sleep on their own.
I did 2 interviews with Rupert Isaacson, the man who took his child to Mongolia to see the shamans, and he wrote Horseboy. Great episodes, but one of the best,
Oh,
if I do say so myself, great episodes. Jeez, Louise.
yeah,
But one thing that he said was in the African culture, you would never leave your child because they would get eaten.
yeah.
I mean, you would never not sleep with your child because the hyenas or the monkeys or the lions or whomever would just sneak in and take your child because you're not with them. And that really opened my eyes to evolutionarily, a
Hmm.
child knows that they're supposed to be with you.
Yeah.
They know in order for me to survive, I need to be with my parent
Hmm.
or an adult, a human. And it just gives you a little bit of a deep breath if you are listening right now and you have a 1 year old or a 2 year old that is wanting to stay with you, give them take that perspective of no, we crave human touch,
Hmm.
being dependent on your mom or dad is healthy, keeps you
And
alive.
beautiful.
Yeah. And
Yeah. And I also really enjoy putting my son to sleep. He's my only child, and they're just so beautiful when they fall asleep. And I
isn't that funny? I'm like, when's the best time? Oh, I love it when she's sleeping. I'm like, okay, that came out wrong, but it's so true.
they're so beautiful. And also, for someone like my son, he's very affectionate. He's very handsy, very tactile. But a lot of that is kind of in ways that don't feel great on my body. And even before he goes to sleep, he's maybe a bit like Teal, where he just needs to like move and shove and nudge and kick. And but then as he falls asleep, his body just softens, and then you can just like cuddle this beautiful being. And so it's sort of like the one time in my day that I actually get to sort of just have a snuggle that's not so movie and like
Yeah,
like
totally.
like pokey, and it's actually beautiful and peaceful. And yeah, so I really enjoy it.
And it fills you
Yeah.
up, right?
Yeah.
So there's a
Yeah.
little thing that next time you get to have that moment with him, you're like, okay, I'm filling me up a little bit again. Our filling up time doesn't have to be away from our child, but I think
It's
it's
true.
important for us to honor, wow, this does feel really good. And this
Yeah.
is filling me up so that I
Yeah,
don't
I love that.
have that rage and that anger. And I know we started there, but it's kind of fun where we've gone because
Yeah.
we were worried, I think, about, oh, this is a heavy subject and this is emotional. It's like, yeah, it is, but it's honest. And
Yeah.
there are lots of different ways through the thicket
Yeah.
of emotion. And I really, really appreciate the conversation and reaching out to me.
Thank
And
you.
now you're my new friend. Yay.
Aw,
You don't have
yay.
a choice.
I love that. I also think that the way that the conversation went is organic and beautiful in the way that when I reached out to you, I was dwelling on this. I was so like caught in this shame spiral, and I'm the only one that's experiencing this. And actually, in talking about it, I found out that there were so many other people that I knew that had the exact same experiences, and that removed a lot of the shame for me because it normalized what I was going through. But like this conversation, there's so many other areas to our parenting journey that we don't have to like focus and get lost in anger or rage or our reaction. There's so many other things and states that we are within our relationship to our children that we can sit in as well. And all of a sudden, poof, I've even forgotten that that even
Well,
happened.
I mean, okay, let's
You
say
know?
that half a percentage of the time that you're with your child or you're feeling yucky and not good and you yell. Like, really? 99.5% of the time is so wonderful. And I think we just so
Yeah.
focus on the negative sometimes. And exactly what you're saying is there's so much more in these moments.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
100%. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was so wonderful to talk to you. Thanks for
I,
giving me the opportunity.
I love it that you were here. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you found one or two meaningful nuggets of information to make your day better. If you think there's value in what we do, please take a moment to tell another friend, family member, or caregiver. We'd love to hear from you at forourspecialkids@gmail.com. You can send in a question, a comment, a topic that you'd like to learn more about, or if you'd like us to highlight a certain person, please send that information to us. It makes our show so much better and so much more valuable for you. Our Facebook and Instagram handle is For Our Special Kids. And finally, remember to witness the wonder and the wisdom within yourself and others. Until next time.